I mean, listen, no disrespect to Yokozuna. I know he's a friend of yours and he was an incredible performer, not taking anything away. But in an alternate universe, if Vader was in the WWF and sort of that Bret Hart transition from Hulkamania to Bret Hart era, that would have been tremendous.
He and Bret would have had incredible matches.
Yes.
And then he and Shawn, the same with Shawn's ascendancy there, they would have had some absolutely unbelievable matches. There's a famous match with Otto Vance and Graz, Austria, where at one point Otto says, "Break my nose." And that's how stiff they were working. And Vader broke his nose. It was one of the most brutal things you've ever seen. But Vader could work. Vader could really go.
Hey, one of the things I've always wanted to ask you about Bruce, because he told this story years ago, I guess it's September of 1996. There's In Your House Mind Games with Mick Foley as Mankind challenging Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, for the world title in the main event. But on the pre-show, well, Savio Vega's in there with John Bradshaw Layfield, and there's a little dust-up just outside of the ring with Sandman and I think Tommy Dreamer and Paul Heyman, and allegedly WWE told no one. Even Brisco was surprised. Did you know what was going to happen? When did you find out that, wait a minute, this was all a plan?
Right before I walked out.
Okay.
I did find out. And Savio, I don't know to this day knows that because I heard him tell a story about, that I didn't know. Because what happened was Bruce had smartened up Savio, I believe. I believe it was Bruce. Because he told Savio, he said, whatever happens, he said, you make sure that John doesn't go over the rail after those guys. He said, wrap the rope around his neck and take him back in the ring, which is exactly what Savio did. But Savio didn't know I'd been smartened up. So Bruce was planning on the fact that this would happen. There would be an escalation, and he was telling Savio to control me because they weren't going to smarten me up. Well, Jack Lanza, who was a really good friend of mine, right before I walked out, pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, kid, just want to let you know something." He said, "If anything happens in this corner over here, don't overreact." And I said, "Jack, you're not going to tell me if anything happens in a specific corner to not overreact if something's not going to happen." He said, "Kid, something's going to happen." He said, "What I'm telling you is don't do anything. Don't go over a rail. Don't go after anybody. It's part of the show." I said, "Okay." Wow. So when we got in the match, Savio had gone out, and I heard him kind of mutter under his breath, "Wrong post." So he literally went over to the other post where what was going to happen, where Sandman threw a beer in his chest. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that's when it was about to happen. So when Sandman, I believe it's Sandman, threw the beer in his chest or his face, Savio, just like Bruce had told him, wrap the rope around my neck. He goes, "Okay, kid, we're going back in the ring. Don't overreact. Be calm." And, so I worked it like I was wanting to go after him, but I'd been smartened up right before. Brisco had never been smartened up. To this day, Brisco's still mad about that. He actually wanted to fight Bruce at one point because when Brisco was coming out, he was going out to fight the ECW guys. There's no mistake about it. He was going out to fight them. And on the way out was when Bruce smartened him up and said, "It's a work, Jerry." Brisco was absolutely furious. By the time I got to the back, all of the boys were at the gorilla position wanting to come out and fight those guys. It was a real, it wasn't necessarily a territorial deal. We didn't dislike those guys because they were a different company, but they screwed up our show. Yes. And these guys thought they had done it, just ad libs, showed up with a bunch of assholes. They didn't know it was a work. Lanza had smartened them up right before I got back. Lanza had just smartened them up, and the guys were really pissed about it. But that was a stupid decision. I mean, that was almost a freaking 20-on-5 fight. And guys somebody would have been hurt bad. Those guys were coming out of the dressing room. It was Taker. It was the Godwins. It was all these guys. All these guys were coming out of the dressing room. They were going out to fight those guys. And that's the kind of risk they took. I thought it was a very stupid decision that WWE did.
Are you disappointed that you never got a chance to work the ECW arena? I mean, it does feel like you would have been, as the Justin Hawk Bradshaw character, you would have been over with that crowd. But if we could have transported the old JBL character back in time and dropped him off in the ECW arena, the heat would have been nuclear, right?
That was so fun. We did the one night stand, and I got through the promo. I'd never had a night like that. That was one of the most fun nights of my life, being there. And they told me don't walk through the crowd because they thought somebody might try to take a shot at me or something. I thought, you got to be kidding me. Of course I'm walking through the crowd, because if somebody takes a shot at me, you got it on tape, and I'm not going to get killed. It's going to be something that people will remember forever. It was so electric. I didn't understand the ECW fan base because we worked when their show was on. So I never saw it. It wasn't like I didn't want to see it. We didn't have, internet back then. We could call stuff up on YouTube. I didn't see it. So I didn't get it until I showed up in person and I saw how passionate those fans were. This is why ECW is so successful. This is awesome.
Well, let's tell some Bruce stories. I know that you've got some fun stories about you and Eric Bischoff and Jerry Brisco and John Cena, and maybe guys were having one too many. You know what story I'm alluding to. You've told me before in private. What's the details of that story?
So we were in Tulsa, and it was Jerry's 60th birthday. So that was 45 years ago. And we go out at a local, like a cowboy bar, and the place is packed. I think it's a Tuesday night because I think it was a taping show. I think it was. And the place is packed, though. It's full of people, regular, normal people that go to bars. And so we're sitting there toasting Gerald Brisco. Bischoff had never been around him that much, I don't think, at the time. And so we're sitting there telling stories about Jerry, about he stretching this guy, stretching that guy, the Brisco brothers, their famous car down in Florida. And finally, Bischoff says, he can't be that great. And when he does, everybody stops. It's like the record scratch. Like, ooh, no, you did just do that. So we scoot all the chairs back, move the tables back. Now the bar is packed full of people. They have no idea what we're doing. And there's now just Bischoff and Brisco sitting there. And Bischoff goes, guys, I'm not scared. He could beat me, but I'm not really scared. Now Bischoff realizes we've had quite a few things to drink. Bischoff realized that there's no way out of this. So Bischoff, to his credit, takes the initiative and tries to leg dive him. Brisco spins him around, throws him down, puts him in a chair, and has it on top of him pretty quick. And so he gets back up, he's kind of laughing. And Bruce says, I can't believe it, Jerry. I've never seen you in all these many years lose a wrestling match. And Brisco says, what? He goes, you couldn't even take him down. And Brisco says, well, I'd put him in the chair. If it wasn't for the chair, he'd be on his back. He'd be on his ass. He had no choice. And he goes, did he put him down? And Cena's there. And Cena goes, look, as an unbiased observer, Mr. Brisco, I can tell you, you didn't take him down. It's maybe your first loss. And Brisco goes ballistic. And I'm going, it's true. It's true. You actually lost on your birthday. I hope Jack doesn't find out about this. I said, this is really embarrassing. I said, this is in Oklahoma. So now Brisco is beside himself. They're both in suits. Now the bar has seen this happen, but there really wasn't a big fight. Next thing you know, these two are rolling around on the floor. They are knocking furniture over, tables over, everything over. People are looking to watch this. It's a pretty good little wrestling match. And finally, Brisco, he'll say it lasted 2 seconds. That's a little longer than that. Bischoff represented himself well. Brisco ends up on top, and Bischoff taps. And Bruce says, no, you're going to let him get away with that? And Brisco goes, what? He's got him. He goes, what? I said, what? He goes, he just making fun of you by tapping. It wasn't even a tap. And Bruce says, you got to tap like you mean it, pussy. That's where Brisco launches up on Bischoff, and he's got him. And Bischoff is not going to tap. He's going to actually die before he taps. And finally, you look at him, and you can see almost the wheels turning in his head like, this son of a bitch he is going to choke me unconscious if I don't tap. So finally, he tapped. And Brisco's like, no, you got to tap like you mean it. So now Brisco and the whole bar is in shock.
Yeah.
They stop. They're just watching this. They get up there laughing. They're hugging. Furniture is everywhere. Beers everywhere. Pitchers have been spilled. And they get back up, put the table up, and go back to drinking.